Welcome to the Creative Plan Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews of items, and convention panels, and other exciting things that we run into from time to time. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Sign to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and rpgpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Okay, good morning. My name is Nate Casimiro.
I'm Nate Stalcup.
And we're both Nat1 Presents. We have a number of different projects, but today we're here to talk to you about podcasting. We do have a podcast called Daft Monks on all of the channels, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And so today we wanted to show you, talk you through how to launch your Steampunk podcast. So this is primarily geared towards people who are going to start a brand new podcast, but we do have some marketing tips once you've launched, especially so if you do have a podcast, we do have some helpful marketing stuff we can teach you at the end too, so just stay tuned with us. And with that, so just qualifications, we do know what we're talking about mostly. We have a podcast. It's half talk show, half actual play D&D campaign. The Daft Monks are actually Van Helsing and Trevor Belmont. They're just kind of like idiot vampire hunters who can't do anything correctly. That's the D&D portion of our show. We did launch in about 30 days of December 2020, and then we went through all last year. We have about 59 episodes up. We have a successful Patreon with about 30 patrons at the moment. We collaborate with other podcast shows. That's always a lot of fun. I am a marketing professional at Zillow, and we just launched our season 2. So long story short, we do know what we're talking about. We are not just making this stuff up, mostly. So I wanted to give you the why podcasting. If you don't know anything about podcasting or you just never really listened, there's a huge audience for it, basically. And it's just a really great hobby. So it's a lot of fun. You might want a podcast if you have something to say, but you've never had an audience to say it to. And your show, your rules. There is virtually no censorship. I mean, Joe Rogan is a great example lately. For years and years and years, he's able to say whatever he wants. Really zero censorship. I just had our first swear word in our title, and all Apple does is just asterisks it out. It doesn't even matter. So you really are not put on any rules or rails. So it's really great if you, whatever story you want to tell, you're able to do that and find an audience. This is less relevant today, but still very relevant. Can be conducted safely from your home, which, me and Nate started because we were bored out of our mind during the pandemic. We wanted to play D&D. Playing remotely on Discord is fun, but isn't quite as fun as we think as in person. And so we decided we wanted to kind of put on a show. We had all this time, all this equipment, so we gave it a shot. Pre-recording lends well if you're a busy person. I have a pretty busy day job. Versus streaming, right? Everybody wants to be a Twitch streamer, but you actually have to kind of consistently be available and streaming online. Whereas podcasting, you can pre-record your stuff, schedule it out. It's a little bit easier for people who are very active. If you have families, careers, all that jazz. Big point here. It's actually fairly easy. We're going to go into, you can definitely start a podcast for free. For sure, I can tell you don't have to spend any money. And for the first few months, we did. We eventually, to save time and effort, we started spending a little bit more once we got patrons. But you can absolutely start a podcast without any budget, which is great. So that's what's wonderful. And yeah, so we'll talk you through different options and when you might want to spend money versus when you might not. So who's listening? Just some, quick stats. I put the source super blurry in the corner with this projector, but these are real statistics. So half Americans age 12 plus have listened to podcasts, 144 million podcast listeners. 1 in 3 Americans listen to at least once a month. 1 in 5 Americans older than 12 listen once a week. Point being, a lot of people listen to podcasts. There is an audience for everybody. And you guys as steampunk people know, there's a big community, but not always easy to find everywhere. So there are people who will listen to your show. There are steampunk podcasts, so we actually can pull up some at the end. So you absolutely will have an audience if you can figure out how to reach out to them. And we'll talk a little bit about how you do that today. So reasons not to podcast, I actually wanted to include this because like anybody who wants to get into social media or influencing or broadcasting or performing arts, don't go to art school to be rich. It's kind of the same thing with podcasting. Don't start a podcast if you want to make money. You can over time. Like we now have patrons. We now break more than even. We pay to use some software now to make our life easier, and so we get more money in our patrons that pay for our software, and we get to like budget for opportunities like this. But it's slow, and you don't want to just do your show to make money because then you'll start making poor decisions. If you're just trying to put ads in your show, people aren't going to want to listen to a show that's really just about money and ads. So don't start a podcast to make money. If you think you're going to be the next Critical Role, maybe you will be, but probably not in the first year. So have realistic expectations, Nate. We started actually, kind of funny story, we started with 6 friends.
Yes.
And we were like, oh, we're going to do this whole big production together. And quickly we found out it's actually a lot of work, and maybe that wasn't the best, some of us wanted to do the work and some of us just wanted to have fun. So just, if you're going to do a podcast, you can be a solo host or you can be co-hosts or you can have a group of people. Just make sure everybody's on the same page of what you're trying to accomplish with your show. And also, to kind of, if you're going to create a podcast, you want listeners. And so you got to get used to kind of putting yourself out there and promoting yourself. My friend Nate here, a little shy, he would never show up to a conference like this and just promote one of his own projects. But I dragged him here today. He's going to talk a little later. I hope I'm going to make him. Point being, if you're going to do any kind of streaming, promotion, social media, whatever, you got to just be willing to tell your friends, tell your family. If you can't sell it to your mom, your dad, your brother, your best friend, how are you going to sell it to anybody else? And with so much content and media out there, you just got to be comfortable. It's a great skill to build if you don't have. So just, if you're going to go into podcasting, I'd say, or you don't want to go into podcasting, it would be because you're just too shy and you don't want to try it. But everybody can do it, I assure you. If Nate here can do it, then
I can do it.
We all and then lastly, this is kind of an interesting point. One thing, we'll talk more about like ways to get more listeners and viewers, but a consistent schedule. It doesn't have to be like live consistency, but like we schedule every Friday. When we miss Fridays, we absolutely see like immediate dips, and not just like for that Friday, but afterwards. Like you missed a week and people suddenly, so it's really important with podcasting. Like people want to listen to you every Tuesday. Like they know your schedule. It's like they have a work schedule. They know to like make time to listen to you on this day, and they want to keep listening to you on the same day. So it's important to just try to stick to a consistent schedule. If you're just like, I might do an episode 1 month and then not touch it for 3 months, you're not going to retain any listeners, and that could be problemsome. So these are just some things to keep in mind before, if you're like, I hate all of the things on that slide, like, well, maybe don't start a podcast, but more than likely any of you can do. So getting started. This is, a lot of times I think people skip this first step. So I'm a marketing person, I work for Zillow, so I do a lot of marketing stuff, and so I like to have people take a step back, and before they just hop on, start recording stuff, just ask you a few questions, like, who are you? Like, what are you trying to make? And, why will people listen to you? So for me and Nate, this is kind of our pitch. Basically, we're kind of like the funny murder hobos in our campaign that really just want to have fun. Like, we just want to role play. We'll have some battle encounters, but we mostly just want to role play for 45 minutes, like every painstaking detail to like major hilarity. So we wanted to bring that, and we wanted to make D&D accessible. I'm kind of the filthy casual of our group. I pay D&D Beyond to make my character sheet because I only have so much time. I work and I have a family. So I wanted to just bring D&D to people who I don't have time for D&D. I don't know all the rules. I'm not going to buy the books, but I still want to listen to a Critical Role is too much for me, but I still want to experience the campaign. So that was we just want to be fun. Yeah. So that was kind of our pitch. And so I encourage you to think about that, because then it goes into these next couple bullets here where you can make your life easier if you take the time, for instance, brainstorming a name that is clever, but also not completely take it. So if you Google, if you're like, wow, I have this really awesome name, it's called Critical Role. And maybe you spell role differently than they do, right? And then you type that into Google, you're going to have trouble ever rank, you're almost at a disadvantage before you ever start. If you take the time to say we really, since me and Nate are just stupid, funny murder hobos, we went with the name Daft Monks. It's kind of it's a pun, so you get that we like humor, but it's also daft as in literally we're stupid, and that's what we do on our show. So put those thoughts together, come up with a name, and then Unfortunately, it's a little blurry on this side. It's namechecker.com. And anybody after the show, you can hit me up or after this presentation. I'll be more than happy to send you the deck or send you links. But like, if you go to that like last link, you can type in a name that you're thinking of. You're like, oh, I want to do the pod, you know, like that's what I want to call it. You type that in, and then it will check like website domains. It will check every social media to see if that handle. And ideally, what you're looking for is like, oh, cool, this name's available on most platforms. That's something. Do this step now. Because later you will spend so much like time trying to like compete with the best selling book that already has your title, and that's just painful. And just, that's not, you want to spend time making content, not like marketing it, right? Like we only do marketing so people listen, but ideally you don't want to market, right? So those are just some thoughts there. So do yourself a favor, Google the name you want to start with, check social media, make sure there's already not like, if we were like, what if we just call it Daft Monk? That would not go super well because there's a band called Daft Monk. So I don't need to beat it to death. But one other recommendation. So me and Nate, we name our podcast as Daft Monk, but we are Nat1 Presents. It's kind of like our like umbrella group for all of our projects. And one thing we learned is throwing a numeral in there is very confusing. Like D&D people understand what Nat1 is, but a lot of people want to spell out the one. So don't use numerals. Don't use symbols. Don't use numerals. Just stick with words. It'll make your life way, way easier. So
learn from our mistake. You know?
Yeah, please learn for us. Okay. So that said, that was kind of the boring stuff. Now here is kind of the more fun stuff. Spend a lot of time on your cover art. In many, many cases, there's a lot of factors how people pick your show. It kind of ranks like, and actually I was in a session where the VP of like PR for Apple Podcast spoke. And the factors are, I think number 1 is the title of your podcast. Number 2 is your cover art. And then number 3 was your description. Now, when you think about it, that doesn't totally make sense to me because I'm like, well, I want to read what a show is about. But actually, that's not, most people will actually just pick it based off of your picture and your title. And that's what they will decide if they want to even listen to your podcast. So we already talked about naming, but then I just want to talk more about your cover art. It needs to stand out. Imagine like, you know, your phone is about this big. There's a grid of 6 squares of different podcasts on there. If yours is just like faded colors, really small, hard to read text, like you don't know what's going on, and then there's like a super bright, like ours literally just says like Nat1 and then it has some illustrative art. I think we showed it in the previous slides up here. Even like our old podcasts, like you could see the smaller text and that detail, it kind of like you lose that detail when you zoom all the way out. Whereas like big, bright colors, right, you can kind of almost see the difference there. That's what you want to go for. In any case, you want to stand out when you're in Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You want to stand out against the competition. So keep that in mind when you're creating cover art. I put a little stuff about logo here. You don't need a logo for your podcast. I'm a marketing person, so I created this kind of Nat1 umbrella thing because I want to always be able to grow and scale. Just know if you are interested in logo stuff, logos need to look big, look good, really big, and really small, right? So if you have gradients and illustrations and all this detail, that's not good for a logo because it's hard to print. Even like this shirt, if I had just done everything in white, it would have been cheaper than white and blue. But if I have 7 colors, this shirt is now twice as expensive. So logos keep simple, okay? Just keep that in mind. Everybody wants like a really detailed, especially you steampunk guys, you guys love your accessories, you love you got your cogs, but if you cram all that into a logo, you're making your life harder later on. Like, keep it simple, okay? So then, hosting, podcast hosting. So this is kind of like, if you're familiar, if you have a website, you need to like put you have to pay a web hosting. You have to have somewhere like WordPress. So maybe you just pay WordPress to like have your website on there. You do have to have, ultimately to have a podcast, you have to have an RSS feed. Now, if you're really technical, you can like code your own RSS feed. But probably that's not most people's case. I work for a tech company. I don't like make my own RSS feed. I pay a podcast hosting company, okay? Now, there are free and there are paid options. I'm going to give you guys 2 recommendations. If you want free, because 100% you can create a podcast for free without spending any money. We did it the first 6 months, I would say. Use Anchor, okay? Anchor is owned by Spotify. It is totally free, tons of features and functionality, and you don't pay anything. They can even help you monetize. So what they're going to do is you're going to upload. First of all, it has a mobile app for your phone, which not all competition does. You can record, if you have just a cheap little headset, you can record onto your phone. You can upload episodes on there, schedule them, publish them, and it will submit it to all the major directories, which we'll talk about later, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. So Anchor is your free option. You'll get the most functionality there. Now, if you want to go paid, most of these other options, there are lots of podcast hosts. They're all like have different pros and cons. But if you want to pay, and when I say pay, these plans usually range from like $8 to $20 a month, depending on, usually it's by how many hours. So you could have one show, you could have two shows, but it's like how many hours. If your show is 30 minutes every week, or if your show is 2 hours every week, you're going to pay more for the 2 hour show. But usually $9 to $20 is kind of what you're going to pay. I strongly recommend, if you want a paid version, Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout is what I started. I actually started with SoundCloud, and that was not made for podcasting. It was terrible, bad analytics. Then I used Anchor. Anchor was pretty cool, and it was free, and we used that for a long time. But then I was a busy guy. I work. Nate doesn't know how to use a computer, so we really had to like start speeding it up a little bit.
Voices.
Yeah, Nate is the talent, so I'm the marketing guy. As soon as we get on the podcast, you're always listening, and like Nate's the funny stories. Like I'm just kind of there to edit, get it online, and promote it. But anyway, we got to a point where we really needed to save time, and I was willing to spend a little bit of money to do that. And so Buzzsprout is, in my opinion, the easiest to use, most functionality, and best host for your podcast. So what is podcast hosting? It's just going to be the place you upload and schedule your episodes, and then it just distributes it to all the other apps. You don't have to manually upload to Apple Podcasts. You don't have to manually upload to Spotify. This will do it all for you, okay? So Anchor free, Buzzsprout paid.
So what is it? You have to have
Sure.
same time every week or same format every week or?
You 100% get to decide that. You could do every day if you had the free time. You don't have to commit to any schedule for any of the apps. If you want to say every third Wednesday except on full moon, like you can do that. You have full range to schedule whenever you want and as often or little as you want. But I will say my number one recommendation, once a week. If not, then bi-weekly, every other week, once every other week. Those are the two most common schedules, but weekly works the best from what I've heard from peers. And I mean, we have a professional podcaster here as well, so I think probably you can maybe attest. How often do you publish your show?
Once a week.
Yeah, once a week.
Special times, like before Wild West Con, I'll usually have some extra shows with some of the people that are going to be featured and throw some extra ones in there. But yeah, it's consistent. And people that don't listen to you live when you do it, people have a habit of listening to, or maybe on their way home from work.
Yeah.
Or when they're jogging. So
We have a bunch of listeners too that binge as well. So if you have a nice library, then they'll binge.
Yeah.
But the purpose of doing it every week is because there's so many options of people to choose from. So once you're lucky enough to have somebody find your podcast, you want to keep them coming back.
Exactly. It's
That's
about
the
just
idea.
keeping them engaged because it is saturated. There are lots of podcasts. Yeah, sure.
I'm a little confused on the term hosting.
Yep.
You said you're using Anchor to host it, but it's also distributing it to other apps. Are those just pointers back to Anchor?
Yeah, they're at the end of the day, all the other apps are just pulling in. It's just a feed. You're creating one web page with a bunch of audio embeds, and all Apple Podcasts, Spotify, they just pull that. They pull that into their interface and list it out for you.
So they search the other sites to find it, and that points it.
Yeah. Now you do. Yeah. Now these sites, all these hosting will like help you submit for you, but there's some sites where you do it, you submit it yourself, and it's just like taking copy and pasting a URL into a bar, and so yeah, it's as easy as that. You'll need a host. Like I said, Anchor free, Buzzsprout for paid. Equipment and mic etiquette. So I'm gonna hand it off to Nate, but I'm just gonna say one thing. The best equipment for you is whatever will get you started on podcasting, okay? You do not need an amazing mic to get started. You can start, lots of people record just off of their phone with like a really nice little like headset or something. So we're gonna say what we use, what we recommend, but do whatever will get you started. Don't think you have to wait 4 months to save enough money for a good microphone. No, get that out of your head, start. The sooner you start, the more you'll learn, the sooner you get online, it'll be better. So that said, Nate will take away with what we use and maybe just some tips on mic etiquette.
So all of this was a learning curve. Originally, we wanted to start it out as a Critical Role type game where there was going to be a long table of us and there was going to be a lot of dice throwing and a lot of background noise. So originally, we went with a dynamic type of mic. And that turned out to not be what we needed in our situation as we adjusted to a two-person podcast. So we switched over to a condenser because now there's no background noise. It's just me and Nate making jokes. And that ended up being the better option for us. And then they have very cheap options for what you want to do. But if you really want to, you can just use the mic that's in your laptop to get started and to get a bass out there, and it doesn't matter that much. But we decided to go with a Sterling SP150, and it comes with 2 little 130s, but those aren't really used for that much. But it's just a nice condenser mic that we just pop up. And then the important thing when you're using a condenser style mic is to have the pop filter, because we noticed right away when we were using the dynamic mics, your P's and S's hit hard. And it is super annoying when you're listening back on your podcast and all you can hear is sucker and succotash. Question?
Yeah, you keep using the phrases, but what is the difference between a condenser and a dynamic?
Okay, so your dynamic mic, when you go to look at it, it's going to be the one you would see up on a stage when someone's doing a presentation. So it'd be like your little silver ball and things like that. So all that mic allows voices and noise from
it's like
all
360.
over.
It's going to pull from all directions, where the condenser, almost think of like a cone.
Yes.
It's going to have just like a certain direction that points at, and it's really just picking up direction in that cone. Where
Yep.
Next question. Why do you put a screen in front of the mic?
So we put the screen in because that eliminates your popping on your P's. So when you're talking, and then we'll go into mic etiquette a little bit later on, you need to be comfortable and be in a proper position. That way, your recording sounds the same every time you do it. You don't want to sound too far or too close. So you put these pop filters in front, or we use a sleeve now, because that eliminates the, when you use a P or even a B sound sometimes, it's really noticeable and that bass will hit in. So it'll be like, pump, 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 like really bad.
Yes.
And like that, it almost hurts your ears when you're listening sometimes.
And you can edit that out, but editing is where you could spend, I used to spend an hour, now I'm spending 10, the less you can edit, the more time you'll have fun just creating content and getting it up and sharing with listeners. That's where you want to focus your time. Editing will create for better content,
Right.
But if you have to get every P and soften, don't worry about this. Like in the beginning, just launch a podcast. The audio can sound cruddy. We'll show you later. Our audio did sound cruddy in the beginning.
So you don't sound like Draco saying Harry's name.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. So those are just ways that if you can, like pop filters and the foam covers are usually like $5 to $10 on Amazon. So it's a very cheap that versus hours and hours and hours of time later. I value my time. My time is worth money. So $5 to $10 I would gladly spend to just reduce.
It helps the quality and gets rid of that headache that comes with it, because you notice it right away, the difference when you actually use one. And then for us, we use the PreSonus Audio Box 96. The thing is, we didn't want a direct USB. You can for a condenser style mic that does your 180 cone that just picks up your voice. You can get a straight USB that plugs right into the computer. But the quality isn't there as much as when you're just using like an analog plug-in. Yeah. So we have to use the audio box because that's going to convert it from your analog style plug-in and then put it to USB for the computer, and that's why we use that.
If anyone, Blue Yeti's a really popular brand right now, that's a USB mic, and that's as good as you're going to get USB mics, but I would say your best audio equipment will be analog first.
And when you're looking into this, it's very important to know dynamic mic, you can just plug in and it's going to start recording. But when you want to upgrade to a condenser mic, you're going to have a 48 volt power supply that goes with that. So you need to have the right box that can actually power supply your microphone, and then you still be able to record. Ask me how I know, we've dealt with it.
Yeah. All you really need to know is if you're going to go, if you go USB mic, it's going to be plug and play, you're good to go. Buy a Blue Yeti, plug it in, you'll be solid. If you're going to do condenser, dynamic analog stuff, then just go into your local Best Buy, Guitar Center, and just ask them, hey, I want to use this mic, do I need any equipment to go with it, right? They might tell you, you need this box to plug in new before it goes into your computer. That's all your key takeaways there.
Yep.
I just wanted to throw some other options out there. So a lot of people do record over Zoom. That's a very popular free option. If you can, the business accounts I think $15 a month, and then that will record your audio up to a cloud. That can be really helpful if you're trying to save money. If your remote guests is very common.
Yes.
So again, I'm going to give you your free and your paid options. Free, if you're doing remote recording, so someone's at their house, you're at your house, and you're recording for free, use Zoom. If you're going to do paid, we actually use Riverside. So that's a $10 to $20 membership a month. And that records our video, records our audio on separate tracks. then I can combine the tracks together later. Separate tracks is really nice because I ramble a lot, guys. You've already figured it out, I'm sure. So Nate, I get to just leave his audio and it's great. Me, I cut about half the things I say because I just keep going. And then our show is like 2 hours longer than it should be. So anyway, Riverside and Zoom will be for remote recording, or if you record locally on your computer, which is usually going to be better quality, no matter how strong the software is. People's internet connections fade, stuff happens. So if you can record on your computer using just like Audacity, Audacity's free. If you like Adobe products, which I do and I use them for work, I like Adobe Premiere and Adobe Audition as well, but those are a paid membership as well. So any questions at the very end, feel free, I'll give you my contact information, I can send you the deck, and feel free to just always email and be like, which editing software should I use? And I'll tell you in great detail which one you want. So don't get too in the weeds right now. I want you guys to start a podcast. I don't want you to focus on what equipment or software you need. We'll help you figure it out. Just decide, know the basics before you go in. Don't buy something you're not going to use is more what we're concerned about.
Because we went our whole first season just figuring stuff out. And man, if we could have went to somebody who had all the answers for us already, that would have been awesome. So we figured we're doing this. If you want to do this, then we'll tell you everything that we learned along this long road that we've been doing so far. And
let us help you.
Yes, exactly.
All right, pre-launch. So you bought some equipment, or you didn't need equipment, you used some free stuff, you have it hosted, you have it scheduled, and you're ready to launch your podcast. What do you do? The next slide, I'm going to talk about the distribution part, how to get it literally on Apple, literally on Spotify. But here's kind of your, I would say, a little bit of a checklist for you before you're ready to launch. First of all, you probably want to record more, say you want to launch with 5 episodes. And I would say launch with 3 to 5. People like to binge, right? Have you ever started a show now in this day and age where you just got 1 episode and I have to wait till next week now? Nobody wants to do that anymore, right? 10 years ago, we were fine Saturday morning cartoons, but today we want to at least have a couple episodes. I have a 3 episode rule for any show I watch on Netflix. If I hated episode 1, I will usually watch 2 more before I decide if I don't like it. That's not everybody. But with podcasting, try to launch with at least 3 to 5, I would say. I think that'll just give people more time to grow and love you and not just make a rash judgment. They might do that anyway, but give them a chance. So anyway, plan to have 3 to 5 episodes, which means you should probably record more than that because you're probably learning in the beginning. That might get a kit. One thing we didn't talk about, Nate, is your distance from the mic, which is usually about a fist-ish, inches.
About 3 to 4 inches if you're going to be using a condenser mic. That's the Goldilocks zone for that microphone. If you're going to use a dynamic, you can put that thing wherever it's going to pick it up.
So I'm going to take this off because I'm talking so much, guys. Sorry. So, you sound great when you're like this, and then the minute you pull away, you start to sound like this. That's what you're going to sound like on audio. And I talk with my hands, I just flail around as I talk.
He's terrible.
And so you'll just hear me come in and out of the mic. And so you gotta work on that. You probably might not nail it the first time, getting used to just always being those 4 inches. It's almost, to me, it feels very stiff. But you just gotta make sure you're comfortable. A good mic stand, there's mic stands that just it's on your desk and it's right here. There's mics where it kind of cranes in. There's arms. Figure out what's good so that you can be comfortable in your chair.
Question, could you use the mics that are part of headsets?
Yeah,
yes.
I don't recommend it though. Mics that are part of headsets are almost always, if you do use a headset mic, make sure obviously it has it's called a little boom arm. It's the little arm that comes out. That almost every single headset you get will have a built-in microphone, even if it doesn't have the arm. But if you don't have the arm, you're going to sound terrible. So yes, if you have a gaming headsets have the arm. So there's lots of headsets you can use that would have that, and that would be great. But if it does not have, it's just if it looks just like regular headphones, don't use that. Even if it does have a mic built in, it will always sound terrible. We've just kind of learned the technology there.
But if that's your only option and that's what you want to use to start out, then there's no problem with that. If that's all you got to start your free podcast, basically. But as you grow, you're going to want to change because you're going to want to have the best of the best.
All right, so you recorded 8 episodes. You decided on the 3 to 5 that were extra good enough that you feel comfortable with putting out there. You've scheduled them, so great. You've tested your audio with your headphones and through speakers. So that's I like to play it on your phone, but then listen to it on your computer with headphones. You're going to hear different things. Sometimes we do a sound check, and I'm this sounds great. And then I put headphones on later, and I listen back to the recording, and Nate's baby is screaming. My husband decided to use the blender for some reason while we were recording. I'm just oh my God, I can hear everything. So I just recommend, go listen to it. Like I also like to listen in my car stereo. Like it's good. Get the different feel. If you, some hosts like Buzzsprout with the paid option will automatically level your audio. So it's all about the right, audio levels. It's annoying. Have you ever watched like a show on TV and it's really quiet and then an explosion happens and you like have to turn the volume down right after you turned it back up? You don't want to do that with podcasting. So leveling audio is something that some hosts will do for you, which is really nice. But you can kind of, even without paying to do that, you can just do that by listening in your car and listening on your phone. You'll kind of hear it. Fun story, I actually blew out a friend's speakers because we had our intro music before we learned to like level our audio. Our intro music was super loud, but the regular episode wasn't, so he was used to the regular. I think we added the intro music later. At first we just started the episode talking, and then we added intro music. So one episode he just turned it on, it's like, BAM! And it's like speakers like blew out in his car, and so that's another, do the testing so your audience doesn't have to. That's a good way to lose a listener there. And then just other things, create a trailer. So definitely most of the main popular apps, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, they'll let you put like a 3-minute trailer up. And there's like special functionality built in for trailers. It like sorts to the top and other things. Apple features trailers on their Discover page. So make a trailer, just, it's your elevator pitch. Play either, and you don't have to overthink it. If you don't want to script something or write it out, just take, after you've done like 3 to 5 episodes, take the funniest or most interesting, compelling parts and just splice them together real quick and use that as your trailer. But just make it compelling because these people might judge you based on your trailer alone before listening to your show.
Always judging.
Always judging me. We talked about make sure you have podcast cover art, and I don't think I mentioned it on the cover art slide, but if you are not comfortable making art, there's websites called Canva where you can just freely put that together. Fiverr, people literally just do that for $5 to $10. Like, you can get someone to make you quality cover art, and I would say like it has to be good. I would really like. I honestly feel like so many people judge our podcast based on just the art alone, and so I'd really say like $5 to $10 is not a lot of money to like ensure that people actually look at your stuff. And there's a lot of cliches. I'm not going to say them all, but like there's definitely things you can do that you can put on your art. That will just look like every single other podcast. So don't do that. Like take the time. It doesn't have to be super illustrated. You don't have to have anything professional, but it just has to be bright, bold. So make sure you have that good art before you launch. And because if you change your art too, you can always change everything in your podcast. You can literally, after an episode airs, replace all the audio. I've done that once we got better. But that said, if you change the art on your podcast, people literally sometimes get confused and don't recognize it in their like list of podcasts. So just something to keep in mind there. And then this is a really big one, guys. Research what category your show is going to fall on. You have to choose a category. You can actually choose up to 3 if you have the right host. So Spotify looks at 3 categories, but most podcast apps only look at the first category. So for Steampunk Podcast, right? You guys probably, depends on what you're going to do, but like if it's making cosplay, you might be like in art or fashion, right? If like me and Nate playing D&D and stuff, it's performing arts or it's leisure games or it's basically look at a show who's already doing what you want to do and look at their category. But miscategorizing, people will never find you then organically unless you direct people there. You want to make your app discoverable and picking the right category. I have met somebody who does I had worked with somebody, I had helped him out and like audited his show. And he did like ghost stories and paranormal and they were like real. He really researched, they're like real stories. He's talked to like psychics and a lot of stuff, like psychic detectives, like actual people. Really great stuff. And he was in entertainment was his category. And I'm like, every one of your competitors are in natural sciences, So it's like, you could just shoot yourself in the foot so early if you don't research your category. And I actually see people do that all the time. They just pick the first word that comes to mind and it actually doesn't make sense, And that was for us. I don't even remember what we did, but I think the very first couple episodes, Critical Role and D&D stuff is usually leisure games. But I didn't pick that because I didn't really think like we were a game per se. I think I just did like pop culture or something. Well, guess what? Pop culture is way oversaturated and it's usually more people talking about music and film and stuff, So pick the right category. It's really important there. Let's see. Get feedback from target audiences. This is a double-edged sword, right? If you ask like 3 friends to listen who actually care and will listen to the whole episode, but also know that those 3 people do not represent, right? Like if you know statistics, like you have to have a big sample size to get like consistent information. So you can ask 3 friends, and they might, if they're like, hey, this audio at this one part sounded really bad, that's good feedback. If they're like, I think you should talk more about dogs, that might just be their opinion, right? So you just kind of want to weigh it out. Like, don't take it too much to heart. If one person doesn't like it or one person it's like not their thing, that's totally fine. The feedback you're looking for is like, it hurt my ears, like it was too loud at this one part, or the editing was really, I couldn't follow who was talking. Like, that's the kind of feedback you want to be keeping an eye out for. All right, so distribution. You've recorded your 5 episodes. We went over all the things that we talked about, how you can like be safe and be careful. Now you need to basically take your RSS feed, which your host just gives you a URL. That's your RSS feed now. And you have to submit it at least 3 places by yourself. A lot of the hosts will have a button that just does it for you, but a little caution of warning sometimes is like Anchor, if it does it for you, Anchor is like the one who submitted it for you, and then you have to reclaim it back from Anchor. So save yourself the hassle. You really just want to go to these, look up Apple Podcasts Connect, Spotify Podcasters, whatever, Google Podcasts, submit the link yourself, give your email yourself, and then that way you can log into their platforms, which give you for free, like how many listeners, how many followers. Apple Podcasts will show when exactly people stop listening to your episode, which can be really helpful data. So those are the big 3. And basically, honestly, Apple Podcasts is king. Apple Podcasts and Spotify are the 2 big ones. Google Podcasts is also considered top 3, but it's not widely used. Most people can kind of attest to. It's more like an SEO thing for search engines. But then even among the top 2, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Apple Podcasts is going to be the one that like a lot of other podcast apps, Overcast, I think Podcast Addict, a lot of these other apps pull from Apple Podcasts. So that's like your source of truth. So make sure you at least submit to Apple Podcasts yourself, Spotify yourself, and I recommend just do Google Podcasts. If you do that, you're going to show up on like 100 apps automatically without even knowing. Right? One of our top listeners, and I don't know if I ever told you this, is like an app. It's called Ghana. It's in India. And like we actually, like, there's ways to tell what's bot traffic and what's not, but like there's actually just like lots of English speakers in India who like listen. So, you're not going to know all the apps you're on once you submit to Apple Podcasts, but that's what you want to do. Now that said, there are some, I don't remember, basically just Google like podcast apps or podcast, distributors or whatever. And then I found a website that had like 30 of them listed, and I just submitted to every single one, Like, why not? You just do it once, you never worry about it again, and you might get some extra listeners there. And I'm happy, I'll send you that link. It was like podcastnews.com or something is what I used. But do all the work in the beginning, and then just don't worry about that. It just keeps spreading out across the universe without any effort on your part. Other just things to know here, Apple might take their time, and it could take as long as a week for you to get approved. So just keep that in mind. I talked about category. Having the right category is super important. And know that some hosts will let you pick 3 categories, but whatever the first one they ask you is the only one Apple Podcast cares about, so that one is really the most important. So just keep that in mind. This is not a case to save the best for last. And then once your podcasts are live, you're pretty much good. One thing too, we'll talk about it later. There's a super great slide, especially for people who have podcasts, where you can actually ask a lot of those distributors, so Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, they have forms and you can ask for them to promote you for free. And I'll give you the links to some of those later. So we'll talk more about that later, but hey, once you've distributed, like you're live. Once they show up, you can literally go into Spotify, search your name, and you see it. Congratulations, you're live.
It's so exciting.
It's so exciting. But guess what? People won't just start listening to you for the most part unless you hit like the new charts, you get featured or something. And that is usually based on how many people subscribe within the first like 30, 60 days. So if you're a brand new podcast, the best thing you can do is like get all your family and friends together or whatever. Be like, hey guys, for the next 30 days, just like tell your friends about it, whatever. Because if in that first 30 or 60 days, you get a bunch of subscriptions, Apple picks up on it, puts it in the news section, and then you blow up and you get, I had a friend who did this, we didn't know about this when we launched, right. but she did it, for January, she launched the fitness podcast, kind of makes sense with New Year's resolutions, and she went from I think 50 episodes a week, or plays a week, to 400 a week, immediately. So it makes a big deal. So, basically, whenever you distribute, and maybe wait a month if you're like, oh, this is a really busy month, I gotta travel, and I have kids and whatever, but next month will be better. Launch next month, because once you launch, you kind of have this 60-day window to not make or break, but to give yourself a head start and maybe get featured if you really do a lot of promotion early on. So social media and promotion, these are just like some tips I learned over time, right? And I'm just going to go through it. Not all of you, at this point, this is all I really, up until now, this is all I really want you guys to take away, but now I'll share as a marketing expert, just here's things that can help you go from good to great, or, great to awesome. So Facebook posts, you make a Facebook page, of course, for your podcast, and you can post on there. That's great, but whenever you link outside of Facebook, Facebook buries that post. Mm-hmm. So if you're linking out to your Spotify, you're linking out to Apple Podcasts, and you post an update about a new episode, Facebook is going to bury that. The exception, though, is when your friends post about you, right? That's when the algorithm's like, yes, people are saying to listen to this. So basically, get your friends and family to share episodes. That's going to be more effective on Facebook than just posting a link, linking out to your episode. Fun fact, a couple months ago, Facebook launched they launched podcasts inside of Facebook. So you just connect your RSS feed in Facebook, and every week, Facebook just automatically posts my new episode now. That wasn't a thing a year ago. But now, so if you're not on your Facebook page connecting your RSS feed, you're missing out because it will just automatically post every week. Then what you want to do is get your friends to share that link. And that's what, and playing inside Facebook, it's not taking them outside to Spotify, so Facebook keeps it in people's timelines. Because they want to keep you, they're selling you advertisements in Facebook, so they want to keep you inside of the timeline and the feed. They don't want to link you off to other websites, unless you're paying them to advertise. So immediately connect your podcast to your Facebook page, have that auto post, and then have your friends share. It's gonna really help you with plays and staying in promotion there. Facebook groups is really popular. If your podcast is about cosplay or steampunk, find a group, read the rules. A lot of them have very strict rules about promoting yourself, but a lot of times if your content is appropriate, if you are going to teach people in your episode about how to make cosplay stuff, like accessories, and that's what the group is about, they will let you promote yourself, post your own show if it is related to the topic on hand. So Facebook groups is a really great opportunity. So we joined a bunch of D&D groups. We also share some other content strategies, tricks that we did to try to get our content on Facebook groups and not be total self-promotion. We'll share in a minute. Let's see. If you share, you can share from the Spotify app as a story on Instagram, and then it has a link in the top. That's kind of an extra feature a lot of people don't know about. And then just this year, Instagram released a sticker. It used to be you had to have 10,000 followers before Instagram stories would let you put a sticker with a link to click out of Instagram. But that actually, just a couple months ago, you can now just add that sticker. So you can now post a story and then have a link that links out to because otherwise, if you've ever been on Instagram, right, if you look at a post, everybody says link in bio. Because if you put a link in a post description, it doesn't hyperlink. And they probably bury it in the algorithm. So what you want to do is use stories and use the sticker to link out. And then in your bio is really where you want to put a link, and you don't want to put links in your posts. So that's kind of some Instagram tips for you there. Use a thing like Linktree. Use a site that basically has, and I'll just we got time. No, we don't. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to show you. But use a website where it just lists 6 buttons, and it's like Apple Podcasts. Basically, if you scan this QR code on your phone, it will take you to a page, build that, and that should be the link in your bio. That should be the link you give out to people. And then hit me up in the future when you're all super legit with all this stuff. I'll teach you about link tracking, and so you know who clicked what link. And then people are clicking on Instagram, people aren't on Facebook, and then you know where to spend your time. So anyway, for an example of that, just scan the QR code, and also follow our show while you're there.
It's really funny.
It's real funny. Hashtags on Twitter and Instagram are really helpful, putting the appropriate. So we have a number, probably a dozen D&D hashtags that when we post about D&D content or we post our roleplay, we use those hashtags. That's really important. Audiograms, so Buzzsprout, the paid hosting I gave you, will create an audiogram for you, which is just it takes your cover art, puts a play button, and does the audio animation while you're talking. So even if you don't have video for your podcast, you only have audio, it does a cool animation cover art thing, and sharing that on social media, that gets a lot of engagement. Turn on cross-platform sharing. So with Instagram, you can connect a Tumblr account and then it automatically posts to Tumblr. I don't use Tumblr, but I want my stuff on there, so I just have Instagram automatically post for me. Better than not posting at all, right? Doesn't matter. So those are just some different tips there. I wanted to share with you before we run out of too much time. One way we found that works really well, we actually, that's weird. I have to get out of the mode. One moment. We created animations from clips of our... Here we go. So what we did is we took like 30-second clips and we paid an animator, usually somewhere between $180 to $400 to animate a 30-second clip. And we shared this on social media. And this one, not this video, we had one video that got 17,000 views because it was an animated clip. And if it was just audio, it never would have succeeded. This wasn't that clip. This is another one we did, but I'll play it for you because I haven't released this one yet. It's like a sneak peek.
I hope y'all like pumpernickel bread, child. Just gonna knead it up real fast and throw it in the oven real quick, like, It's gonna get toasty in this kitchen if you fellas wish to join me.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I love pumpernickel bread. It's my absolute favorite. That's not what I was thinking at all. I was thinking, let's get the fuck out of here and just deal with the rats instead of this guy.
So it was a clip about Nosferatu, and we were just joking. So anyway, we're able to post that in like vampire groups on social media, and instead of just being like, "Hey, check out my podcast that has vampires in it," sharing a video, that then people are like, "Oh, that was really funny. Where can I get more of that?" Go to the podcast. These are the strategies. This will help marketing in general, because otherwise everybody's like, hey, I have a podcast, hey, I have a podcast, hey, I have a podcast. Especially since the pandemic, that's what a lot of people did. We were kind of guilty of that, actually. So those are just things to keep in mind there. I think we got to wrap up in the next 5 minutes because the next presenters probably want to use the computer. So I'm going to probably speed rush through these last slides. Analytics. Just make sure Apple Podcasts, Spotify, sign up for their podcaster accounts, and they'll give you data, which episodes are being played, how many subscribers. Analytics in podcasting is actually kind of weird and hard, and basically they all use different metrics, and so you're not going to get one metric. You're not just going to you'll get analytics in Anchor and in Buzzsprout that will tell you how many listens you have across all platforms, estimated, but it's only going to be so accurate. At the end of the day, you want to kind of just go on Apple Podcasts and just listen to that kind of stuff. And we'll kind of leave it at that. Just know they also use different language. Follows and subscribes, about the same thing. Follow is Apple Podcasts, but other apps use the word subscribe. Downloads and plays are usually the same, but not necessarily in how they define a play. Some apps say you have to listen more than 5 seconds. Some apps is just a 1 second. So lots of the data is not like, podcasting is still very in its infancy, and so the data is not consistent across all platforms. So you want to make sure you're logging in different places and looking, at least the top ones like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Advertising, at a certain point, you might want to grow your podcast. Listen, you can pay money to advertise, and it will work a little bit, but it's expensive. But I don't recommend it. I do come to events. Live marketing works better. Speaking and connecting with people, especially people who are your audience. Steampunk. Some of you, does anyone play D&D in here? Okay, yeah. So you're our audience, right? That's the best way to promote. But that being said, if there is a good time to maybe pay a little bit of advertising money, it's when you first launch, especially to get part of that new and up and coming category in the Apple Podcast app. And so there's Overcast and Podcast Addict let you advertise within your category. And they're trying to kick us out. I'll try to sped this up. They'll let you advertise for $150 or $200 inside your category. They'll put a banner, if you're in a D&D category, they'll show my banner in that category. That's going to be the best bang for your buck. I usually find you can get 30 subscribers plus lots of click-throughs and plays by paying something like $150 to $200, and that sounds like a lot, but in terms of advertising, I've spent a lot more and gotten a lot less, to be totally honest.
They don't stick around. You'll notice a bump in your numbers, but then those people don't hang out.
Okay. I gotta get out of here, so request reviews and ratings. That's what I'm gonna say. Ask people to leave reviews on Apple Podcasts, and now with Spotify, this is recent, but they can rate you 1 to 5 stars. PreLaunch, that's an old slide that shouldn't be there. And if you have any questions, there's all our social media. So basically everything you need to get a hold of us. Just scan this QR code. We have more business cards. Thank you guys for coming, and start your own podcast. I hope to hear you guys soon. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
I wish I heard you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. And feel free to enjoy our other shows, such as D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Scion Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion hero to Ragnarok story. Thank you for listening.